All right. So we start with the third step prayer. God, I offer myself to thee, to build with me and to do with me as thou wilt. Relieve me of the bondage of self, that I may better do thy will. Take away my difficulties, that victory over them may bear witness to those I would help of thy power, thy love, and thy way of life. May I do thy will always. All right. We don't have Rob with us today, but it's going to be Bill and I are going to keep things going in the right direction. We are in More About Alcoholism, and we are on page 41, down at the near the bottom. As soon as I regain my ability to think. Bill?
Yeah. Okay. As soon as I regained my ability to think, I went carefully over that evening in Washington. Not only had I been off guard, I had made no fight whatever against the first drink. This time, I had not thought of the consequences at all. I had commenced the drink as carelessly as though the cocktails were ginger ale. I now remembered what my alcoholic friends had told me, how they prophesied that if I had an alcoholic mind, the time and place would come that I would drink again. They had said that though I did raise a defense, it would one day give way before some trivial reason for having a drink. Well, just that did happen and more. What I have learned of alcoholism did not occur to me at all. I knew from that moment that I had an alcoholic mind. I saw that willpower and self-knowledge would not help in those strange mental blank spots. I have never been able to understand people who said that a problem had them hopelessly defeated. I knew then it was a crushing blow.
Yeah, and so this is a great paragraph for the kind of the explanation of a man getting to the point of admitting to that they're powerless over alcohol, and is basically looking back at the situation and finding that they completely blanked out for a period of time. In this case, he did for several days. He talks about him kind of had no plans really to drink. Everything was going good, and that's one of the things that's kind of it's one of the things that people don't think of, and that is that they drink when things are going really good too, and they find that this is just as much of a draw as if you were going to drink because something was bad. But anyway, he says he not only was he off guard, but he'd made no fight whatever against that first drink, and that again is kind of describing the malady of the mind. And he was trying to not drink on his own, using his own willpower, and that didn't work. And he even admits it near the end of the paragraph. I saw that willpower and self-knowledge would not help in those strange mental blank spots. So Bill?
Yeah, this is a good description here of the mental part of alcoholism. What happened to this guy? What he did, he put up no defense against the first drink. In other words, he didn't even think of the consequences at all. We have a built-in forgetter. And for some reason, we forget about the bad stuff, and we just look at how alcohol is going to make us feel and the good stuff. And at the bottom of page 41, it gives us a warning. If I had an alcoholic mind, the time and place would come, I would drink again. That's what the people from AA told him. In other words, if he had the mental part, that the time and place is going to come, that he's going to drink again unless he gets in a program and gets spiritual help. And on the top of 42, it talks about those strange mental blank spots. Those things happen to everybody, not just alcoholics. How many times you walk in a room and when you get in the room, you forget why you were there? Or we're in like auto mode and our brain shuts off a little bit. And that's what happened with this guy. He didn't want to drink. He had no intention of drinking, and something in his brain short-circuited and told him to go ahead and drink. It'll be okay. And that's what happened. He forgot all about the stuff that he was told, all about the consequences, all about what the people told him about alcoholism. How can you think the drink through if you're having a strange mental blank spot? Your brain goes blank for a few minutes or whatever. You can't think the drink through. That's not going to help us. We need to get a spiritual program under our belt. All right, we're on the top of page 42. Two of the members of Alcoholics Anonymous came to see me. They grinned, which I didn't like so much. Then asked me if I thought myself alcoholic and if I were really licked this time. I had to concede both propositions. They piled on me heaps of evidence to the effect that an alcoholic mentality, such as I had exhibited in Washington, was a hopeless condition. They cited cases out of their own experience by the dozen. This process snuffed out the last flicker of conviction that I could do the job myself.
Yeah, so he's really showing how powerless he is and coming to that conclusion, how he came to that conclusion, and finally getting there. It's the hopeless kind of place to be when you are finally admitting that you are alcoholic and that you were really, in this case, really licked this time. It was just a great paragraph that describes the powerlessness of and the futility of being alcoholic. Bill?
What this paragraph is doing here, Bill's giving us a hint here right at the beginning. He's giving us a suggestion. It says 2 members of Alcoholics Anonymous came to see me. When you go on a 12-step call, it's a really, really good idea to go with somebody else. Don't go by yourself. You don't know what's going to happen. You don't know what the person's going to do, how they're going to act or react to whatever you tell them. So the best thing to do when you go on a 12-step call, bring somebody else with you. Bring your sponsor or your sponsee or one of your network, or bring another person from AA with you, because 2 sober people are going to be a lot better to deal with one drunk than a one sober person trying to deal with one drunk, because you have no idea what they're going to do. Most likely they're going to try to talk you into drinking with them. So you're better off just having somebody else with you. And then they asked him if he thought himself an alcoholic and if he was really licked. Licked means are you beat? So they asked him if he thought he was alcoholic and if he was beat. On page 30, it says, we learned that we had to concede to our innermost selves that we were alcoholics. They asked him if he was an alcoholic, and now he had to concede both propositions. He had to admit that he was an alcoholic. In other words, now he's at the point where he's willing to do step 1. He's got step 1. He understands. In the previous paragraph, he knew he had an alcoholic mind, and now he's admitting to the other people that are talking to him that he is an alcoholic, and he's beat. In other words, alcohol defeated him. He's powerless over it. They didn't have the steps written like they do today, but they had the same idea. And then right at the end, it says they cited cases out of their own experience by the dozen. This is where your war story belongs. It belongs on a 12-step call so that the other person can identify with you. That's what Bill Wilson did with Dr. Bob. He talked about his drinking, not about Dr. Bob's drinking, and Dr. Bob identified with him. The identification is what's important here. When you're in a meeting and it's going around the room and you're talking about a topic, you're not supposed to be bragging about how many gallons of booze you drank and how many bouncers you beat up and all this other nonsense that people talk about in meetings. That stuff belongs on a 12-step call or if it's a speaker meeting and you're up at the microphone. Otherwise, your story is not supposed to be told in like a discussion meeting or a big book meeting or a 12 and 12 or whatever kind of meeting you're in. Your story belongs on a 12-step call. That's where it's going to do the most good. Okay, we're on the next paragraph. We're towards the bottom of page 42. Then they outlined the spiritual answer and program of action, which 100 of them had followed successfully. Though I had been only a nominal churchman, their proposals were not intellectually hard to swallow. But the program of action, though entirely sensible, was pretty drastic. It meant I would have to throw several lifelong conceptions out the window. That was not easy, but the moment I made up my mind to go through with the process, I had the curious feeling that my alcoholic condition was relieved, as in fact it proved to be.
And so we're here where he's making the decision that he, in fact, is powerless over alcohol. He has no ability to really combat it with under his own power. And they basically talk about the spiritual answer, the acceptance of it, and his relief once he had accepted it, when he kind of gave up the fight. And I kind of relate to this feeling because I had the same kind of struggle and was really fighting it hard. And then when I finally just let go, I remember feeling this kind of rush that came over me, and my shoulders dropped and I kind of relaxed. And there I was. I had really just had stopped the process of trying to figure out a way to drink, and again stop fighting it. In this case, he's having to swallow and or get rid of some of his old notions that he could do anything on his own, and it kind of in the beginning it seems a bit drastic. It seems difficult, but in fact, it's broken down real nicely. And step 1 and 2 here is essentially saying that you're going to accept the fact that you're powerless and go through the process. Bill?
Yeah, they outlined the spiritual answer. What's the spiritual answer? That's a reference to step 2. The problem is step 1, and the answer to step 1 is step 2. That's the spiritual answer. We're powerless over alcohol, and step 2 tells us we need to get a power greater than ourselves in our life. So this guy got step 1, and he got step 2. And then towards the bottom of that paragraph, it says, the moment I made up my mind. Step 3 says, made a decision to turn our will and our life over to the care of God. The moment I made up my mind to go through with the process, that certainly sounds like step 3. So this guy has got step 1, step 2, and step 3 at this point, or he's got the concept or the idea of them, and he's starting to get better because now he has the feeling that his alcoholic condition was relieved. Well, by going through the first 3 steps of this program, you can get an effect, and it says right after the 3rd step prayer, sometimes a great one was felt, and that's what this guy got. He got an effect, or he got the feeling that his alcoholic condition was relieved. He did 1, 2, and 3, and he started to get better. He started to feel better about himself. Unfortunately, I don't believe he went any further, and sometime later on, he wound up going back out again. All right, we're on the bottom of page 42. Quite as important was the discovery that spiritual principles would solve all my problems. I have since been brought into a way of living more satisfying and I hope more useful than the life I lived before. My old manner of life was by no means a bad one, but I would not exchange its best moments for the worst I have now. I would not go back to it even if I could. Fred's story speaks for itself. Oh, want me to stop here?
No, go ahead, Bill.
Okay, there's only a short little paragraph. Fred's story speaks for itself. We hope it strikes home to thousands like him. He had felt only the first nip of the ringer. Most alcoholics have to be pretty badly mangled before they really commence to solve their problems.
Right. So basically, here is quite as important was the discovery that the spiritual principles would solve all my problems. And we're talking things like his resentments, his angers, things that anger him, fears, etc. And those things can be solved with the using the spiritual principles that are outlined in this book. And it is a kind of, once you've accepted that and started living that way, it turns out that in almost all cases that it's more satisfying than the old way when you were letting alcohol control you. So it's not necessarily that you're in a bad situation, but it is once you've made this change and you've started living in this way, the spiritual way, you'll find that you would not exchange it for back to the way it was. So hopefully it kind of you resonate with what they're saying here, and hopefully you're not at that point where you've been badly mangled before you really commence to before you solve your problem. And again, we talk a little bit about consequences. That's a lot that's what brings people to AA, is that they're tired of the consequences and want a solution for that. Bill?
Yeah, like was mentioned, it says the spiritual principles will solve all my problems. That doesn't mean all your problems are going to just go away instantly, but it means now you have a higher power to rely on, and you can get help through spiritual means, and your problems will start to go away. They'll start to get less and less. They're not going to disappear completely and go away 100%, but because you're living on spiritual principles, now these problems won't be the end of the world. You'll have a way of dealing with them. You can ask your higher power to help you. You can pray about them. You can go through the process of the 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and 9 and start, dealing with your problems according to what this program tells us to do. And it says that Fred's story speaks for himself. He only felt the first nip of the ringer. This guy wasn't like homeless, living in a cardboard box. He still had most everything that he had, and he just got the beginning of it. When they say the nip of the ringer means you're going through hard times, you're having a lot of trouble, and he only felt the first beginnings of that. He didn't lose everything. He wasn't homeless and that kind of thing. He was just like in the beginning stage of alcoholism, and he started to get better. So he was able to get better because of the instructions or the suggestions that the people in AA gave him. All right, we're on the middle of page 43. Many doctors and psychiatrists agree with our conclusions. One of these men, staff member of a world-renowned hospital, recently made this statement to some of us. What you say about the general hopelessness of the average alcoholic's plight is, in my opinion, correct. As to two of you men whose stories I have heard, there is no doubt in my mind that you were 100% hopeless apart from divine help. Had you offered yourself as patients at this hospital, I would not have taken you if I had been able to avoid it. People like you are too heartbreaking. Though not a religious person, I have profound respect for the spiritual approach in such cases as yours. For most cases, there is virtually no other solution.
And this is, as I understand it, and Bill, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but I think this is Dr. Percy Pollock, I'm sorry, and this is, then he's talking to Bill, and I think Fitz Mayo was the other person that we were talking to or talking with here. So the the nice thing is that they make reference to the fact that doctors and psychiatrists are in agreement with the AA's conclusions, and it's one, that he's describing. The Dr. Percy Pollock is describing the fact that people are so bad off that he normally wouldn't take them, because it's just it's hopeless that they aren't going to be able to make it back. However, he's admitting that the spiritual principles and abiding by them and accepting them has turned people around, even the worst of cases, which is what he's describing these two as having. And the nice thing is that the doctor, in making again reference to the support that the medical field brings to the table, and that is that he has profound respect for the spiritual approach. Bill?
Yeah, most people believe that this was Dr. Percy Pollock, but there's a book out called Writing the Big Book, and the guy who wrote that book, he claims that he thinks it was Dr. Leslie Holman. So there's different sources, and you get different answers, but most people think it was Dr. Percy Pollock, and he was from Bellevue Hospital in New York. And this other guy, Dr. Leslie Holman, he was from Johns Hopkins Hospital in Maryland. And Fitz Mayo lived in Maryland, so it's very possible that Bill went down to visit Fitz, and they went in and stopped over at this hospital, and they were showing their original manuscript or whatever, trying to get some, feedback on it. So it's really not important who the doctor was. The point is, this guy was a renowned psychiatrist, and he said, according to his opinion, you people are completely hopeless apart from divine help. So, in other words, he's saying scientific methods and medical science can't really help alcoholics, because no matter what the medical community tries to do, alcoholics usually wind up drunk again. And he's saying for most cases, there is virtually no other solution. So he's going along with the spiritual approach that AA came up with. And he's saying that seems to be the only thing that's working for alcoholics. And this is a guy that dedicated his life to working with people as a psychiatrist and trying to help people, because that's what they used to do back in the day. They used to send alcoholics to psychiatrists because they thought we were screwballs, and that's why we kept drinking. So the psychiatrists were the people that were dealing with the alcoholics most of the time. Today we have counselors and therapists and alcohol rehabs and that kind of stuff. They didn't have that stuff back when the AA was first starting. They just sent people to a psychiatrist, and if you kept drinking and you kept getting yourself in trouble, they put you in the nut house. That's how they used to deal with alcoholics back in the day. All right, we're on the last paragraph on page 43. This is an important paragraph. I highlighted the whole thing in my book. Once more, the alcoholic at certain times has no effective mental defense against the first drink. Except in a few rare cases, neither he nor any other human being can provide such a defense. His defense must come from a higher power.
Yep. And again, as Bill said, this is an important paragraph, and I highlighted it as well. The alcoholic at certain times has no effective mental defense against the first drink. And again, we're talking about the mental insanity of it all. And when he's talking about neither the alcoholic nor any other human being, meaning other people outside of you, providing support, such as a spouse, a sponsor, a friend, etc., including yourself, can provide such a defense. And his defense must come from a higher power. It's also, this is the first time that higher power is used in the book. You can't fix self with self, and that's kind of what they're kind of referring to here. And again, making reference to the mental side of it. Bill?
Yeah, Bill Wilson's trying to drive this point home. he's going to say these certain things over and over and over again throughout the book. That's why he says once more. He's telling us again and again and again, because Bill understood that alcoholics are very thick-headed people. If we hear something once or twice or three times, we pay no attention to it. We have to hear it over and over and over again before it starts to sink in. And Bill understood that, because Bill was one of us, and he heard all of these different, ideas on how to stop drinking, and why don't you, pull yourself up by your bootstraps and all this other stuff. And it didn't do any good for him. So he understands you have to keep hearing things over and over and over again. And he's telling us at certain times we have no effective mental defense against the first drink. There's going to be times when you can say no, and there's going to be certain times when you won't be able to say no, because that mental part kicks in. Those strange mental blank spots, whatever you want to call it, your brain short circuits. So there's going to be times when we have no defense against the first drink. And you can only take the first drink when you're not drinking. So we're powerless over alcohol when we're drinking, and we're powerless over alcohol when we're not drinking. And then it says that no human being can provide such a defense. And that's including ourselves. Like Leo pointed out, we can't get sober on somebody else's say-so. It just doesn't work like that. Our defense must come from a higher power. In other words, we have to get spiritual help. We have to get a higher power in our life. Well, whether you want to call it God or higher power or power greater than yourself, whatever term you want to use, that's fine with you. If you have a problem with the word God, use higher power. Bill put higher power in capital letters because he meant it related to God. It means the same thing in his mind anyway. And I have written after this paragraph, a problem cannot be solved with the same mind that created it. In other words, your mindset has to change. Your thinking has to change. You have to get rid of your old ideas. If you're still thinking the same way that you were when you created the problem, you're not going to be able to solve it. And that's supposedly a quote from Albert Einstein. A sick mind can't treat a sick mind. No matter how much you try, like Leo said, you can't fix self with self. You can't fix a broken brain by using a broken brain. And like it or not, we have a broken brain when it comes to alcohol. So once that mental part kicks in, and that's what this whole chapter was basically about. It was about the mental part of alcoholism. And for some reason, our thinking doesn't work right, because when you're addicted to something, whether it's alcohol or anything else, the addiction is in your brain. It told us previously that the main problem of the alcoholic centers in his mind. That's where the problem is. So you can't use that same mind to fix the mind that's not working right. We need spiritual help. We have to get a higher power in our life. Whatever your higher power is, that's your business. And basically, this is the end of step one here. Everything that we did, the doctor's opinion, Bill's story, there is a solution, and more on alcoholism. All of this is references to step one. And there'll be a couple of mentions of step one in the next chapter, but this is basically considered everything from step one. It ends right here when we got to this. And you can ask yourself, pretty basically what this is saying is that we're powerless over alcohol. That means there's absolutely nothing I can do about keeping myself sober. And you can ask yourself, how does that feel now that you know there's nothing you can do to keep yourself sober? It's not supposed to feel good. It's supposed to make you feel so miserable that you're willing to go on to the rest of the steps and do the rest. That's what the purpose of step one is. It's to move you forward to step two and then keep on going. Okay, I'm pretty much done with that.
Okay. Well, that does conclude chapter 3, more about alcoholism. And we'll go ahead, and since we're right here at about the halfway mark in the hour, we're going to turn to and start chapter 4, which is We Agnostics. And it's going to it's a great chapter for those that are the non-believers, but it's also a great chapter for the true believer in religion and God. And I think that sometimes you have just as much of a hangup of accepting a spiritual solution with a higher power as somebody as something that's by your side, and providing that strength is also for the ultra or true believer of religion and God. They feel like that they've already got the answer, and they don't need to use that belief to their advantage in accepting a higher power. And that's what we're going to try to work on here with the chapter We Agnostics. Bill?
Okay, we're on page 44, chapter 4, We Agnostics. In the preceding chapters, you have learned something of alcoholism. We hope we have made clear the distinction between the alcoholic and the non-alcoholic. If when you honestly want to, you find you cannot quit entirely, or if when drinking you have little control over the amount you take, you are probably alcoholic. If that be the case, you may be suffering from an illness which only a spiritual experience will conquer.
Yeah, what a great entry or first paragraph to start things off with. First and foremost, in the preceding chapters, you have learned something about alcoholism, and the answer to that should be a resounding yes. And we are talking about you as the individual. I've learned that, and you've made clear that what an alcoholic is and what an alcoholic isn't. And so they wanted to make that clear as well. And then they get to, really kind of referencing the malady and the allergy. And then that if you want to quit, you cannot quit entirely, and have little control over the amount you take in. So the inability to stay away from that first drink, and then once you've taken that first drink, the inability to stop at a reasonable and or normal time is being outlined here. And they're also being careful. They're just saying you're probably alcoholic. Again, this is something you should come up with on your own. And they do then kind of take it one step forward, and that is talking about the fact that if this is the case, and that you are you can't quit entirely, you have little control over the amount you take in, then only a spiritual experience is going to solve this problem, and just getting kind of you ramped up and started thinking in that way. Bill?
Yeah, a lot of people, they turn the statements in this paragraph into questions, and you can make questions out of them. And probably the two main questions that they make in here is, if when you honestly want to, you cannot quit entirely. So you can ask yourself, when I honestly want to, can I quit entirely? Yes or no? That's showing us the mental part of alcoholism. When we stop drinking, can I stay stopped? Can I quit and stay quit? That's what that's talking about. Or if when drinking, you have little control over the amount you take. You can ask yourself, do I have any control over the amount I take once I start drinking? That's the physical part, what Dr. Silkworth referred to as the allergy. Once we take the drink, we lose control of the amount we drink. And when we stop drinking, we can't stay stopped. And those are like the two characteristics, or if you want to call them symptoms of alcoholism. And then it says, you're probably alcoholic. So the book can't tell you 100% whether you're alcoholic or not. You have to decide that for yourself. It told us on page 30, we learned that we had to concede to our innermost selves that we were alcoholic. We have to do that. We have to concede that we're alcoholic. This book can't say you're an alcoholic. It's not going to do that. But you have to make that decision yourself. And step one says, we admitted we were powerless over alcohol. We admit it. In other words, I have to admit that. I have to admit that I'm powerless over alcohol. The book can't do that for me. And then it says, if that be the case, you may be suffering from an illness which only a spiritual experience will conquer. According to Alcoholics Anonymous, the only way you're going to get over alcoholism is through a spiritual experience. It doesn't say 90 and 90. It doesn't say pick up the coffee cups. It doesn't say sweep the floor. It doesn't say double up on your meetings. It says the only thing that's going to work is a spiritual experience. And that's what these steps are designed to do. They're designed to bring about a spiritual experience, or some people call it a spiritual awakening. And the only difference is one happens instantly and the other one happens slowly over time. But it's going to do something, and all the spiritual experience does, it changes your mind. Okay, we're on the second paragraph on page 44. The one who feels he is an atheist or agnostic, such an experience seems impossible. But to continue as he is means disaster, especially if he is an alcoholic of the hopeless variety. To be doomed an alcoholic death or live on a spiritual basis are not always easy alternatives to face.
No, they're not. And one that feels that either you're atheist or agnostic, such an experience seems impossible. And it does at first until you finally get, you finally go through that acceptance phase. And the idea here is that you have a choice to accept it and go through and experience it, or you've got disaster, especially the hopeless type of alcoholic. You've got disaster facing you, and the idea here is to be doomed an alcoholic death, or live on a spiritual basis, are not always easy alternatives to face, and it's really hard to kind of think in terms of that. It's definitely one where you've got to make that it's what seems like a very, very difficult decision to make because of the control that alcohol has on your body. But making the right decision to go through a spiritual principles is the way to go. Bill?
Yeah, it says here, if he is an atheist or an agnostic, the experience seems impossible. What an atheist is someone who does not believe in God, and they will tell you there is no such thing as God. And an agnostic, what agnostic means, the word gnostic, that means knowledge. And when you put ag in front of it, it means without. So they're talking about without knowledge of God. An agnostic says you can't have any knowledge of God. They don't necessarily believe or disbelieve. They just believe that you can't have any knowledge of God. So that's why he called this chapter, We Agnostic, because most people, not everybody, but a lot of the people in AA, when they first got to AA, they had given up on God and they didn't believe God was going to help them. And then he talks about here, to be doomed an alcoholic death or live on a spiritual basis are not always easy alternatives to face. That shows you the level of mental health that we're dealing with when it comes to alcoholics. We look at this and we can't decide whether we want to die an alcoholic death or whether we want to live on a spiritual basis. You know, just how painful is this alcoholic death? How bad is that? Yeah. We don't want to live on a spiritual basis. Most alcoholics, at least when we're still using, we don't want anything to do with any kind of spirituality. So, and when you're doomed an alcoholic death, that means you're staying powerless over alcohol. You're stuck in step one and you haven't gone any further. And to live on a spiritual basis, that means you moved on to step two, and now you're getting a higher power in your life. That's what I believe Bill was talking about when he put this in here. Okay, we're on the third paragraph on page 44. But it isn't so difficult. About half our original fellowship were of exactly that type. At first, some of us tried to avoid the issue. Hoping against hope, we were not true alcoholics. But after a while, we had to face the fact that we must find a spiritual basis of life or else. Perhaps it is going to be that way with you, but cheer up. Something like half of us thought we were atheists or agnostics. Our experience shows that you need not be disconcerted.
Yeah, and the idea here is that he's trying to then make that transition to letting you know that while it might sound difficult, it really isn't, and you shouldn't be all worried or at odds with it. You should just relax, which is kind of what they're trying to say in this paragraph as well, and and accept this the spiritual solution. You either have to do that and find a life that's based on the spiritual principles, or else, and or else is going to be that um, um, alcoholic death that we've just referenced here in the paragraphs preceding. So the again, it's just basically asking you to relax, that this isn't as hard as you might think it is, and that's kind of what they're trying to say. Bill?
Yeah, but Bill's telling us, even if you're an atheist or an agnostic, you can still go through this program and you can still get it and you can get better. It doesn't matter what your belief is, what you believe in, you can go through this process and you can still get it. Yeah, and like Leo pointed out, yeah, there's a warning here. We must find the spiritual basis of life or else. And what's the or else? Or else we're going to die an alcoholic death. That's what it told us in the previous paragraph. So that's a warning. If we don't find the spiritual basis of life, we're probably going to die an alcoholic death, because we can't get better on our own willpower. It just doesn't work. On the last paragraph on page 44, if a mere code of morals or better physiology of life sufficient to overcome alcoholism, many of us would have recovered long ago. But we found that such codes and philosophies did not save us, no matter how much we tried. We could wish to be moral. We could wish to be philosophically comforted. In fact, we could will these things with all our might. But the needed power wasn't there. Our human resources, as marshaled by the will, were not sufficient. They failed utterly.
Yep. They basically saying here is that the if you know the self-knowledge, self-will, and basically just having a better outlook on life, if that was all sufficient enough to overcome alcoholism, you would have recovered long ago. So that that type of thinking doesn't contain the elements necessary for recovery, and no matter how hard you work at it, it's just not going to work. Just being moral isn't going to do it, and philosophically comforted. In fact, we're all no matter how hard you try with all of that, it's just not going to work. And the power isn't there in the manner that we are trying to describe in this program that is being outlined. Bill?
Yeah, Bill's trying to tell us that a code of morals or a better philosophy of life is not going to fix alcoholism. Just trying to do the next right thing is not enough to keep you sober. And he's telling us that our human resources are going to fail. That's our willpower, our choice, our thinking to drink through, pulling yourself up by your bootstraps. That stuff might work for a short period of time, but that stuff is not going to be sufficient. It's going to fail. Somewhere down the line, that stuff is just going to stop working. Okay, the first new paragraph on page 45. Lack of power was our dilemma. We had to find a power by which we could live, and it had to be a power greater than ourselves, obviously. But where and how were we to find this power?
Yep. So another good paragraph. I've highlighted the whole thing, and that is this lack of power was our dilemma. That inability to face things on your own, under your own self-will and self power is what's important here. And we had to find a power that we could that's greater than ourselves, with which we could live. And but where are we going to find it? We're going to answer that coming up, but it basically is setting us up for that big question, which everybody would have at this point. It's like, okay, I understand I can't do this under my own self-will or self-power, and living a moral and or philosophically positive life is not going to do it. So what is this, and how am I going to get it? And that's what we're about to go in and answer. Bill?
Yeah, Bill is very crystal clear on this. Lack of power was our dilemma, not lack of knowledge or lack of intelligence, lack of power. We don't have enough power to deal with alcoholism. And he says we have to find a power greater than ourselves, and that's in italics. When a power greater than ourselves, hello, that means it's not us. If it's greater than ourselves, we can't do this by ourselves. And then it has a question. Well, where and how are we to find this power? Now it's going to answer it and tell us a little bit about about where we're going to find it. Okay, we're on the next paragraph on page 45. Well, that's exactly what this book is about. Its main object is to enable you to find a power greater than yourself, which will solve your problem. That means we have written a book which we believe to be spiritual as well as moral. And it means, of course, that we are going to talk about God. Here, difficulty arises with agnostics. Many times we talk to the new man and watch his hope rise as we discuss his alcoholic problems and explain our fellowship. But his face falls when we speak of spiritual matters, especially when we mention God. But we have reopened the subject, which our man thought he had neatly evaded or entirely ignored.
Yeah, a lot of people that come into AA have that issue or challenge, and that is the wanting to not be around God and or higher power, and that's what we're trying to get you to understand. And the answer to that question, but where and how are we to find this power? Well, it's in this book, and its main object is to enable you to find a power greater than yourself. And that power is going to solve not only your drink problem, but it will also assist you in working through your other problems that are not necessarily related to alcoholism as well. And it does kind of make this statement, they are going to talk about God, and they do it without being ashamed to do it in this book. And so and even today, people still come in bright-eyed and with anticipation, and once they hear a reference to God, their shoulders will drop. They basically start to turn things off, and they close things off. And what we're trying to do here is say we identify with that, we understand where you're coming from. However, we're asking you to have an open mind and open in your eyes and your ears and look and listen to what is being said, and you can overcome this resistance of accepting God and or a higher power into your life in a spiritual manner that will help you to solve your problems. Bill?
This book is telling us the main object of this book is to enable you to find this power that's greater than yourself that will solve your problems. Back in the forward to the first edition, it told us to show other alcoholics precisely how we have recovered is the main purpose of this book. Well, the main purpose of the book is to show other alcoholics how we recovered. And when it says we, they're talking about the first 100. And what did they do? This is what they did. It's telling us on page 45. They got a power in their life that was greater than themselves that could solve their problem. That's what they did. That's how they recovered from alcoholism, by getting a power greater than themselves in their life. And that's what this book is talking about. And that's what this book is going to show us how to do. That's how we're going to get this power in our life, by going through this process and doing the rest of the steps that are outlined in here. That's going to help us get a higher power, or a power greater than ourselves in our life. Okay, we're on the bottom of page 45.
Bill,
We know how we feel. Okay, you want to stop here?
Yeah, we'll go ahead and stop here, and then we'll we'll pick it back up next week right there at the bottom of page 45. And so with that, I'm going to close with the Serenity Prayer and then open things up for discussion. So, God, grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, the courage to change the things I can, and the wisdom to know the difference.